Hey guys, it is Forge here and welcome back to another mod review, and today we're going to be covering part 5 of the Applied Energistics 2 mod for Minecraft 1.21.1 NeoForge. And in case you haven't seen the previous 4 parts, I definitely recommend you guys check those out, as we've covered everything from getting started all the way up to wireless access to the system. But for today, we're going to be checking out the Autocrafting for Applied Energistics 2, so let's get into it. So to get us started today, we have the ME pattern encoding terminal, and this guy is crafted with an engineering processor and an ME crafting terminal. So this pattern encoding terminal is placed like any other type of terminal on a glass cable or any other type of cable, and we can access it, and it has access to pretty much everything stored within our system. And as you can see, we also have all of the configurations and settings that we'd normally have on any other type of terminal. But down here, we have something similar to what we'd have in a crafting terminal. We have a little crafting window and an output slot, but this isn't actually for crafting. This is for encoding these blank patterns, which we can place in this slot here. And to get yourself some of these blank patterns, you simply need 2 iron ingots, a copper ingot, 3 glowstone dust, a charged or regular Certus quartz crystal, and 2 quartz glass, and that'll give you 2 blank patterns. And what this will allow us to do is encode patterns onto these blank patterns that will then tell the system how to actually craft certain recipes. And we can do different types of patterns. We can do crafting patterns, we can do processing patterns for things like furnaces or other modded machines, we can do smithing table patterns, and finally we can do stone cutting patterns. So say for example we wanted to be able to craft oak planks from oak logs, we'd put the oak log there, and this would then be a pattern for crafting oak planks. So we can encode it using this encode pattern button, and this would now be a crafting pattern telling the system that you can craft 4 oak planks from 1 oak log. Additionally, if you have the JEI mod installed, which is just this menu over here, you can also drag by holding the left click button down and drop into the pattern encoding terminal, and this will allow you to encode patterns with materials you don't currently have in your system. And on top of that, to save you a bit of time, you can click on these items as well, and then shift and left click on the encode pattern button, and this will autofill the recipe for you in here. And to do processing patterns, it's pretty similar. You just put the item that you want to actually process in this left slot, and then in this right slot we have the primary output, and then we have secondary outputs in case your machine can output multiple things. But this time it won't actually auto detect what the output's going to be. You do actually need to actually fill that in yourself. So say we wanted a furnace to smelt stone from cobblestone, we'd actually have to specify the output. And also with processing patterns, you can increase the amount of number that are expected to output and also be input. So if we left click on this stone with another piece of stone, it will say 1 cobblestone makes 2 stone, and then if we simply right click over it, it will change this down to 1. We can do the same on the left hand side here as well. Or if you have JEI installed, you can simply shift and left click on the encode pattern and save yourself the trouble of having to fill this in manually. And we can do the same with smithing table patterns. We can make it so you can turn a diamond pickaxe into a netherite pickaxe just using the template and the netherite ingot. And again, we can do the same for the stone cutting pattern. So this time we'd put the cobblestone into this little slot here, and then we select what we want it to output as, and then this will save as a stone cutting pattern. You'll also have noticed we have 3 little buttons just down here. The first one we have is the clear config/settings. So this will just clear anything from these grids here. And this works the same for the processing patterns as well as the smithing table patterns. The next button we have is the substitutions button, and by default this is disabled, but you can just click on it to enable it. So say you were trying to craft a piston, by default this will only try and craft a piston with oak planks. But say you wanted to do it with spruce or jungle or whatever other type of plank you have, you just put this to substitutions enabled, and this would allow alternate items in the recipe. So now this will try and craft first with oak planks, but then it will try and do it with spruce or any other type of plank if there aren't oak planks available. And then the final button we have is the fluid substitutions button, and this will basically allow you to substitute things that use buckets, for example, with using fluids which you have directly stored within your system. So for example, we got this recipe where we're washing a smart cable to get the regular non-dyed cable, and this will use a water bucket. But if you have this disabled, this will only ever use a water bucket. But if you have fluid substitutions on, this will now actually allow you to use this water from the system as well. So now that we've covered how to actually encode patterns, let's move on to the actual block that does the auto-crafting, and that here is the molecular assembler. And this guy can be crafted with 4 iron ingots, 2 quartz glass, a crafting table, an annihilation core, and a formation core. So this guy will be used in more advanced setups later on, but for right now we're just going to cover the basics of it. So we can place this guy on the network, and he just needs power. He doesn't actually use any channels, so you could put a quartz fiber right here and he would still work, or you can hook it up to any other type of external power and it will work still. And as you can see, we've now accessed its GUI, and right here this is the pattern that it's going to try and craft when you input the items. So we've got the 4 planks from 1 oak log, so if we put that right there, you'll notice this isn't actually doing anything right now, and that's because we need to send it items. So you can do something like this. You could also use importers and exporters and also any other type of item pipe to use this guy, but essentially what we're going to do is we're going to put the oak logs in the top, and then it's going to start crafting them into oak planks. And this guy can also accept up to 5 acceleration cards, which is going to make this guy go super duper quickly. Obviously it's limited by hopper speed though. And in addition to crafting patterns, you can also use these smithing table patterns. So we've got this one here for making a netherite pickaxe. So if I put all of this through, you'll see we've made 2 netherite pickaxes. And also we can swap this out for a stone cutting pattern. So then it will take this cobblestone and turn it into slabs. But it is worth noting you can't put processing patterns into the molecular assembler, so it can't do things like smelt items for you. But this is just Applied Energistics' most basic auto crafting. There are some really cool things you can do with this mod. So now let's get into the first step in setting up your fully fledged auto crafting system, and that is the crafting CPU. And this is a multi-block that uses all of these blocks here. So the crafting unit, the crafting storages, the crafting co-processing unit, and the crafting monitor. So the first block we have is the crafting unit, and this is kind of a filler block slash crafting ingredient. So you can kind of put it into your crafting CPU. It doesn't do anything, but it's just kind of used to fill space. And this guy can be crafted with 4 iron ingots, 2 fluix glass cables, 2 calculation processors, and a logic processor. The next few blocks we have are the crafting storages, and these guys are available in all of the standard cell types. So you got 1K to 256K, and these store the ingredients and also the intermediate ingredients needed for a craft. So the bigger the crafting job you want to do, the bigger the crafting storage you're going to need. And a valid crafting CPU requires at least one of these crafting storages to be installed, although you can install as many as you like. And to craft these guys, it's very simply a crafting unit with the ME storage component of the size you want. So the 1K for the 1K, the 4K for the 4K, and so on. The next block we have is the crafting co-processing unit, and this is actually an optional block, so it's not actually required for the CPU, but I definitely recommend you install some of these guys. And these co-processing units do 2 different things when installed in the CPU. Firstly, it allows more batches of items to be sent out, essentially increasing the tick rate of the crafting CPU. And secondly, it allows crafts to run in parallel for within one CPU. So say you're trying to make a bookshelf and you're trying to craft planks and also a book. By default, without a co-processing unit, this would craft planks and then a book, but with one co-processing unit, it would allow the book and the planks to be crafted at the same time and then crafted into a bookshelf. And for each one of these co-processing units you add to your CPU, this will allow another parallel craft to be done. And these crafting co-processing units can be crafted with a crafting unit and an engineering processor. And finally, we have the crafting monitor, which is another optional block for the crafting CPU. And this guy will display the current item that the CPU is working on crafting on this little purple screen you can see on the block. And to craft this guy, it's simply a crafting unit and an ME storage monitor. So now let's actually build some crafting CPUs, and these can come in all different shapes and sizes, but the smallest valid one is actually just a crafting storage on its own. So we've got this 16K here, and if we connect that up now, we now have one crafting CPU. Now we can also expand on this, so we could add a crafting unit here, and this would still be a valid one, but as soon as we add one here, this is now actually invalid because these do actually need to be in a square shape. So now if I added another 16K crafting storage here, we now have one with 32K storage in it. So we can build this guy up in pretty much any direction so long as it stays as a cube or a square. As you can see, this is still valid, but we're still only using just these two. These are all just filler blocks at the moment as they're just the crafting units. Now we could also just build this completely out of these crafting storages as well, and you would have a ridiculously big crafting storage. But we can also add the crafting co-processing units. As I said, these are optional, but they do increase the speed of the crafting jobs, and they also allow you to run multiple jobs in parallel using one CPU say we wanted 16, we can just type that in as well. Next, we press the next button, and then we come to this menu. So this is going to use 40 bytes out of our CPUs, and we can select which CPU we actually want to use. We can choose between CPU 1 or CPU 2, or we can just put it on automatic. So this doesn't really matter. So we'll just start the craft, and this should then start crafting, as you can see, 16 oak planks. And while we're running any crafting job, as you can see, we've got the crafting monitor showing we're crafting planks over here. We can also see it from this crafting status button in the terminal. So this will show the approximate amount of time that this is going to take to complete, the amount of available materials, and then the things scheduled to be crafted. It'll also show what CPU it's going on in, and you can also suspend the craft as well as cancel it from here. And with these full block pattern providers, you can add a molecular assembler onto every side, so we can put one on all 4 sides here, and this will actually allow us to use all 4 of these molecular assemblers when we're crafting our planks. Now, to set up processing recipes, for example with a furnace, this can be a little more complicated, and we're using this flat face ME pattern provider right now, and we can put in our cobblestone smelting to stone pattern. And the difficulty with this one is furnaces have one input side and one output side, and the input is obviously from the top, so the pattern provider needs to come in from the top, and the output is out the bottom. So in this case, we're actually going to have to use an import bus to pull the stone back in from the furnace. So if we start a craft to make, say, 10 stone, we can start that, and then this will start smelting over in this furnace, and you can see it's going to take a little while, as it says right here, the estimated time. But as this completes, this will now actually get pulled back in by the import bus, not through the pattern provider. But if you've got a mod like Mechanism installed where you can actually configure the input and output, so in this case we got them going to the back, which is where this pattern provider is, you don't actually need the import bus to pull back straight in. We can actually just request to craft, let's say, 100 stone, and this should easily start crafting, start smelting through in this smelting factory if I gave it power. And there you go, you can see now it's all smelting through, and we're getting stone into our system, and we can see the crafting status right here. Also, this system is smart enough to support multi-step crafts. So say we needed to craft some pistons, but we had no planks available, as long as the crafting recipe for the planks is in the system, it can then craft the planks to then make the pistons. And since this system only has one pattern provider at the moment for both the planks and the piston, normally this would craft the planks and then the piston, but thanks to our co-processing units in our CPUs, this should allow the system to take full advantage of the molecular assemblers surrounding this pattern provider and craft in parallel the planks and the pistons. So if we start this piston craft and say we want to make 10 of these and we start it, we should see some planks being crafted as well as pistons. The next item we have is the ME pattern access terminal, and this guy's crafted with an ME pattern provider, an engineering processor, and any of the illuminated panels. So say you had tons of these ME pattern providers, and we had ones for furnaces, and then we had loads of different ones for crafting. This pattern terminal will allow us to see every single crafting recipe we currently have installed in the molecular assemblers, also furnaces, and any other machine we have installed. It also has a search bar to let us search for specific pattern providers which have specific things in it, so this is the one with the piston in it. It also has a couple of settings. We have the terminal style, so we can just change the size of the terminal, and then we have the display mode, and by default it's on show visible pattern providers, so it will show any pattern provider that is set to visible, and that is where this little button comes in here, the pattern access terminal hide or show. So if we press this button, it will now actually hide this from the pattern access terminal. Next we have show visible pattern providers with empty slots, so it will now actually hide this one as it's completely full. And then finally we have show all pattern providers, so it will actually ignore this setting in the pattern access terminal to hide them. And from within this terminal we can basically move any pattern around into any different pattern provider we want. And the final item we have today is the crafting card. And this guy's crafted with a basic card and a crafting table. So this crafting card is supported by 3 different devices, the ME interface, the ME level emitter, and the ME export bus. And it works pretty much the same in all of them, but today I'm just going to be showing it off for the export bus. So if we wanted a chest full of oak planks, for example, we'd want to put the oak planks in here and it would start exporting everything we have in the system. Unfortunately, we only have one at the moment. But if we come into this export bus and put this crafting card into this slot of upgrades over here, it will now actually request crafts from the system and then start filling this up with oak planks. And with this crafting card now installed, we do get another configuration over here called crafting behavior. And by default, this will use stocked items and then craft items while exporting, but you can switch this over so it doesn't actually use stocked items from within the system and only crafts new items to export into this chest. So I think that's about everything I wanted to cover in this part. I hope you guys did enjoy, and I hope you have found this useful. If you did, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.